I stood in the corner of the crystal ballroom at the Meridian Hotel, watching my sister Victoria command the room like she owned it. In a way she thought she did. Tonight was the 5-year anniversary gala for NextGen Technologies, the biotech startup that had become the darling of the venture capital world. Everyone who mattered in Boston's tech and finance scene was here, champagne glasses glinting under the chandeliers, congratulations flowing as freely as the expensive wine. Victoria spotted me near the hors d'oeuvres table and cut through the crowd with the precision of a missile. Her designer gown probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair was styled in that effortlessly elegant way that actually required 3 hours at a salon, and her smile was razor-sharp. "Emma," she said, gripping my arm hard enough to leave marks under the fabric of my simple black dress. "What are you doing here? I specifically didn't invite you." "Mom invited me," I said calmly. "She wanted the whole family here." Victoria's perfectly made-up face twisted with irritation. "Of course she did. Listen to me very carefully. Stay away from the investors. Don't talk to them. Don't even look at them. You'll embarrass yourself and me. I'm just here to support the family business," I said. "Family business?" Victoria laughed, the sound brittle and cold. "You have no part in this business, Emma. You had your chance at success and you blew it. Everyone here knows you're the family failure. Don't remind them." My younger brother James appeared beside Victoria, straightening his tie with the self-importance of someone who'd been given a vice president title at 28 purely through nepotism. "Vicky's right, Emma. These are serious people. Billionaires. Power players. They don't want to waste time talking to someone who couldn't even finish a startup." "I didn't realize casual conversation was such a risk," I said evenly. "It is when you represent failure," Victoria hissed. "Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to build NextGen's reputation? How many meetings, how many pitches, how many hands I've shaken? I'm not letting you damage that because Mom felt sorry for you and insisted you be included." Our mother appeared then, elegant in a silver gown, her expression worried. "Victoria, please. Emma has every right to be here. She's family." "She's an embarrassment," James said bluntly. "Everyone in this room has heard the story. Emma Sullivan, the failed entrepreneur who burned through investor money and couldn't even get a product to market. She's a cautionary tale." Mom's face crumpled slightly, but she tried to maintain her composure. "That was 7 years ago. Emma has moved on. She works as a consultant." Victoria cut her off with disdain. "Whatever that means. Probably freelancing from her studio apartment, barely making rent. Meanwhile, James and I have built something real. NextGen Technologies is valued at $1.2 billion, Emma. That's billion with a B. We're about to announce a major expansion, new clinical trials and partnerships with 3 Fortune 500 companies. This is serious business." "I understand," I said quietly. "Do you?" James demanded. "Because I don't think you do. The investors here tonight put hundreds of millions into NextGen. They took a risk on us, on our vision, on our leadership. If they see you here, if they associate the Sullivan family with your failure, it could raise questions. It could make them nervous." "That's ridiculous," Mom protested weakly. "Emma's past has nothing to do with NextGen." "Everything is connected in this world, Mom," Victoria said. "Perception is reality. And right now, I need everyone in this room to perceive the Sullivan family as winners, not as people who harbor failed entrepreneurs." Our father joined the cluster, champagne in hand, his face already flushed from drinking. "What's the problem here? Why isn't everyone mingling?" "Emma's the problem," James said. "She needs to leave." Dad looked at me with that familiar expression of disappointment I'd seen for years. "Emma, sweetheart, maybe it would be better if you just went home. This is Victoria and James's night. Let them shine." "I drove 2 hours to be here," I said. "Mom specifically asked me to come." "And that was a mistake," Victoria said. "Look, I'll pay for your gas, okay? Consider it a consultation fee for staying away from my investors. Just go home, Emma. Please. For once, don't make everything about you and your feelings." I felt Mom's hand on my shoulder, her touch gentle but uncertain. "Maybe just for tonight, dear. We can have a family dinner next week, just us. Somewhere quiet. Where she won't embarrass us in front of important people," James added. I looked at each of them, Victoria with her contemptuous expression, James with his entitled smirk, Dad with his dismissive shrug and Mom with her apologetic eyes. This was my family. These were the people who were supposed to support me unconditionally. I'll stay out of your way, I said finally. I'll sit in the back during the presentations. I won't approach any investors. That's not good enough, Victoria insisted. I want you gone, Emma. I don't want to spend this entire night worried about what you might say or do. I don't want to field questions about my failure of a sister. Just leave. Victoria, that's enough, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. No, it's not enough, Victoria shot back. You don't understand what's at stake here, Mom. This isn't just a party. This is about securing NextGen's future. We have investors considering a Series D funding round. We're talking about another $300 million. If anything goes wrong tonight, if anyone gets cold feet, that's on Emma. How exactly would my presence cause investors to withdraw $300 million? I asked, genuinely curious about the logic. Because you're a reminder of risk, James said, as if explaining something to a child. Investors hate risk. They hate failure. You represent both. It's not personal, Emma. It's just business. It feels pretty personal, I observed. That's because you're sensitive, Victoria said dismissively. You always have been. You took it personally when your startup failed. You took it personally when investors stopped returning your calls. You took it personally when your co-founder sued you. Everything is always about your feelings, Emma. But this isn't about feelings. This is about protecting a billion-dollar company. Before I could respond, a chime sounded through the ballroom. The presentations were about to begin. Victoria gave me one last warning look before smoothing her dress and gliding toward the stage where a podium had been set up. James followed her, and our parents drifted toward the reserved family seating at the front. I stayed where I was, in the back corner as promised. The next 45 minutes were a showcase of Victoria and James's supposed brilliance. Victoria spoke eloquently about NextGen's revolutionary approach to personalized medicine, their breakthrough in cancer treatment protocols, and their expanding global reach. James presented financial projections that made the crowd murmur with appreciation. 30% year-over-year growth, profit margins that would make any investor salivate. They showed a video testimonial from patients whose lives had been changed by NextGen's treatments. They unveiled partnerships with major hospital systems. They announced the opening of 3 new research facilities across the country. It was objectively impressive. Victoria basked in the applause, accepting congratulations from the crowd. James worked the room with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real adversity. Our parents beamed with pride, Mom dabbing tears from her eyes, Dad shaking hands with everyone in reach. Then the bank president of Northeastern Capital, Margaret Chin, took the stage. She was in her 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a navy suit that radiated authority. Northeastern Capital was one of the biggest private equity firms in the region, and Margaret herself was legendary in Boston's financial circles. Good evening, everyone, Margaret began, her voice carrying easily through the ballroom. I'm here tonight to talk about something we at Northeastern Capital take very seriously, the power of vision backed by capital. NextGen Technologies has been one of our most exciting portfolio companies, and we're proud to have supported their growth. Victoria smiled brilliantly from her position near the stage, clearly expecting praise. But tonight, Margaret continued, I want to talk about the real story behind NextGen's success. The story that most people in this room don't know. The story of how this company got its start and who made it possible. I felt a flutter in my chest but kept my expression neutral. I'd been watching the room carefully, noting which investors were present, which financial institutions were represented. I'd seen Margaret arrive earlier, accompanied by 3 members of her executive team. 5 years ago, Margaret said, NextGen Technologies was just an idea. Victoria Sullivan and James Sullivan had a promising concept, some preliminary research and a lot of ambition. But they had no money. They'd approached dozens of venture capital firms and everyone said the same thing. Too risky, too early stage, too unproven. Victoria's smile had frozen slightly. James looked confused. They clearly hadn't expected this narrative. The Sullivans needed $200 million to get started, Margaret continued. That's not seed money or angel investment. That's serious capital for serious infrastructure. Labs, equipment, personnel, clinical trial funding. No traditional VC firm was willing to take that risk on an unproven team. The room was completely silent now, everyone listening intently. But someone did take that risk, Margaret said. Someone believed in the vision enough to provide the full $200 million in startup funding. Someone who asked for only two things in return: majority equity stake and complete anonymity. I saw Victoria's face go pale. James had stopped moving entirely, frozen in place. For 5 years, Margaret said, Northeastern Capital has served as the administrative agent for this anonymous investor. We've managed the funds, we've provided strategic guidance, and we've helped protect the investor's identity as requested. But tonight, at this 5-year milestone, our client has decided it's time to reveal themselves. Margaret turned and looked directly at me, standing in my corner at the back of the room. Emma Sullivan, would you please join me on stage? The silence that followed was so profound I could hear my own heartbeat. Every head in the ballroom turned to look at me. Victoria's expression was a mask of shock and horror. James had gone completely white. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad looked like he was having a stroke. I walked toward the stage calmly, my simple black dress suddenly feeling perfect for the occasion. Not flashy, not attention-seeking, just quietly professional. As I climbed the stairs to the platform, Margaret extended her hand with genuine warmth. Ladies and gentlemen, Margaret announced, Emma Sullivan is the majority investor in NextGen Technologies. She provided the initial $200 million in startup funding 5 years ago, and currently owns 51% of the company. Every major decision, every expansion, every success you've celebrated tonight was made possible by her capital and her faith in this vision. The murmuring in the crowd was like a wave crashing through the ballroom. I saw investors pulling out their phones, probably Googling my name. I saw Victoria swaying slightly as if she might faint. James had sat down abruptly in the nearest chair. But Emma, Margaret continued, addressing me directly now, insisted on remaining anonymous. She didn't want recognition. She didn't want credit. She wanted her siblings to have the chance to build something on their own merits, without being seen as riding on her coattails or her investment. She wanted them to succeed or fail based on their own abilities. I took the microphone Margaret offered me. The room was completely silent again, hundreds of eyes fixed on me with expressions ranging from shock to curiosity to dawning respect. Thank you, Margaret, I said, my voice steady. I want to start by acknowledging that Victoria and James have done excellent work with NextGen. The company's success is real and their contributions are valuable. I didn't reveal my involvement because I genuinely wanted them to have the opportunity to build something without my shadow over it. I saw Mom crying now, though I wasn't sure if they were tears of joy or confusion or shame. 7 years ago, I continued, I did have a failed startup. That story is true. What my family doesn't know is what happened afterward. The lawsuit from my co-founder was settled out of court. He sued me for $3 million, claiming I'd mismanaged funds. What actually happened was that I'd redirected investment money from product development into research that he thought was wasteful. That research became the foundation for a patent that pharmaceutical companies desperately wanted. I paused, letting that sink in. I sold that patent to a consortium of biotech companies for $480 million. After taxes, legal fees, and settlement costs, I walked away with $287 million. I was 28 years old and had more money than I knew what to do with. Victoria made a small choking sound. James had his head in his hands. I could have started another company, I said. I could have invested in real estate or stocks or any number of traditional wealth-building strategies. Instead, I watched my younger sister and brother struggle to get NextGen funded. I watched them face rejection after rejection. And I saw potential in their idea. I looked directly at Victoria and James. But I also knew that if I revealed myself as an investor, it would change everything. You'd always wonder if you succeeded because of your abilities or because of my money. Every time someone praised NextGen, you'd question if they were really praising you or just being polite to the major investor. So I approached Northeastern Capital and set up an anonymous investment structure. Margaret nodded. Emma's terms were unusual but clear. She wanted majority equity for providing the full startup capital, but she wanted zero involvement in daily operations. No board seat, no strategic input unless requested, no recognition. She literally gave her siblings $200 million and complete operational freedom. Why? someone in the crowd called out. Because I believed in them, I said simply. Despite everything that happened tonight, despite how they've treated me for years, I believed Victoria had the vision and drive to make NextGen succeed. I believed James had the operational skills to support that vision. And I wanted them to have the chance I'd had, the chance to build something meaningful. I pulled out a document from my small clutch purse, one I'd been carrying all evening in case this moment came. This is the original investment agreement. Dated 5 years ago. Signed by me as the primary investor and by Victoria and James as the company founders. They signed it accepting the anonymous investment. They never asked who the investor was. They just took the money. Margaret took the document and held it up for the room to see. I can verify this is authentic. Northeastern Capital has maintained these records in our secure files. Everything Emma is saying is documented and verified. I turned back to the crowd. Over the past 5 years, NextGen's value has grown from my initial $200 million investment to approximately $1.2 billion. My 51% stake is now worth roughly $612 million. Not a bad return on investment. Someone started clapping. Then someone else. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was applauding. Investors were nodding with appreciation. This was a success story they understood, a smart bet that had paid off magnificently. But I wasn't done. However, I said, and the room quieted again, I need to address something that happened earlier tonight. My sister told me to stay away from the investors. She said I would scare them with my failure. She said I was an embarrassment to the Sullivan family. My brother agreed. They wanted me to leave this event entirely. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Several investors shifted uncomfortably. Margaret's expression had gone ice cold. They didn't know I was the majority investor, I continued. But they did know I was their sister. They knew I'd driven 2 hours to be here because our mother asked me to attend. And they still tried to throw me out because they were ashamed of me. Victoria found her voice finally, shaky and desperate. Emma, I didn't know. You have to understand, I didn't know it was you. If I'd known. If you'd known I had money and power, you would have treated me differently, I finished for her. That's exactly the problem, Victoria. Your respect is conditional on what someone can do for you. Your kindness is transactional. You weren't ashamed of a failure. You were ashamed of someone you perceived as beneath you. I looked at James, who was staring at the floor. You called me a cautionary tale. You said I represented risk and failure. You said my presence might make investors nervous. The irony is that I am the investor. Every dollar you've spent for the past 5 years came from me. Every salary you've paid, every piece of equipment you've bought, every clinical trial you've funded, all of it traced back to my failure. Mom was openly sobbing now. Dad looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Margaret stepped forward. I want to make something clear to everyone here. Emma Sullivan is not just a passive investor. Over the past 5 years, she's been quietly consulting for Northeastern Capital, providing strategic guidance on biotech investments. She's helped us identify 3 other startups that have returned over 300% on investment. She's brilliant, professional, and one of the most ethical people I've worked with in 40 years of banking. She turned to Victoria and James. Your sister gave you every opportunity to succeed. She funded your company, stayed out of your way, and let you take full credit for building NextGen. And tonight, when she came to support you, you tried to throw her out of a party celebrating a company that wouldn't exist without her. The room was deathly silent again. Several investors were shaking their heads in disgust. I saw our family's lawyer, who was in attendance, frantically typing on his phone, probably looking up the investment documents and corporate structure. So here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm but firm. Effective immediately, I'm exercising my rights as majority shareholder to make some changes to NextGen's leadership structure. Victoria's eyes went wide with panic. Emma, please, don't do this. I'm sorry. We're sorry. We didn't mean. You did mean it, I said. That's why this hurts, Victoria. You meant every word you said tonight. You genuinely believe I'm a failure and an embarrassment. You just didn't realize the failure was bankrolling your success. I turned to Margaret. I'd like to call an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. We'll be discussing leadership changes, compensation restructuring, and establishing new protocols for how family members treat each other in professional settings. Consider it done, Margaret said. As the administrative agent for your controlling interest, Northeastern Capital fully supports this action. James stood up shakily. You can't kick us out of our own company. We built this. We've worked for 5 years. On my dime, I said. And I'm not kicking you out. I'm restructuring. There's a difference. You'll both remain with the company, but there will be changes to titles, compensation, and authority. You'll report to a new CEO that I'll be appointing. You'll also both be enrolling in mandatory professional development programs on leadership, ethics, and respect in the workplace. Who are you appointing as CEO? Victoria asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Patricia Morrison, I said. She's currently the Chief Medical Officer at Boston General Hospital, and she's been consulting with me on biotech investments for 3 years. She's brilliant, experienced, and most importantly, she treats people with dignity regardless of their perceived status. I saw several investors nodding in approval. Dr. Morrison was well known and highly respected in the medical community. Additionally, I continued, I'm establishing a new compensation structure tied to performance and values alignment. Both of you have been drawing salaries of $850,000 annually plus bonuses. Going forward, your base salary will be $400,000, with performance bonuses tied not just to financial metrics but to leadership evaluations conducted by your teams. If you're good leaders who treat people with respect, you'll be rewarded. If not, your compensation will reflect that. That's not fair, James protested. We've been running this company into the ground from a culture perspective, Margaret interjected. Emma, before tonight, asked me to conduct confidential interviews with NextGen's employees. Do you want to hear what we found? James went silent. Victoria looked like she might be sick. We found that 43% of your staff described the leadership as demanding and dismissive, Margaret said, reading from her tablet. 37% said they'd been belittled or demeaned by executive leadership. 51% said they wouldn't recommend NextGen as a workplace to friends or colleagues, despite believing in the company's mission. Your turnover rate is 32%, nearly double the industry average for biotech. She looked up from the tablet. You've been so focused on impressing investors and building the company's external reputation that you've created a toxic internal culture. Emma discovered this through the employee feedback channels Northeastern Capital established. And now she's fixing it. I pulled out another document. This is a new code of conduct for all NextGen leadership. It includes provisions for respectful communication, anti-bullying policies, and regular 360-degree reviews where employees can provide feedback on management without fear of retaliation. Victoria, James, you'll be the first to undergo these reviews. If you can't meet the standards, you'll be replaced. Victoria was crying now, mascara running down her face. You're destroying everything we've built. You're humiliating us in front of everyone who matters. No, I said quietly. You humiliated yourselves. I'm just holding you accountable. There's a difference. Mom finally approached the stage, climbing the stairs slowly. Emma, sweetheart, please. Can we talk about this privately? As a family. We stopped being a real family a long time ago, Mom, I said not unkindly. We became a hierarchy where success determined value. Where money determined respect. Where your children felt entitled to mock and dismiss their sister because she didn't fit their definition of achievement. I never wanted that, Mom said, tears streaming down her face. But you allowed it, I said. Every time Victoria or James said something cruel, you offered weak protests but never real consequences. Every time Dad dismissed my choices, you stayed silent. You wanted peace more than you wanted justice. And that taught them they could treat me however they wanted without repercussions. Dad had finally made his way to the stage as well, his face red and his expression a mixture of shame and anger. Emma, you're being vindictive. You're using your money as a weapon. That's not what we taught you. You're right, I agreed. You taught me to be quiet, to be accommodating, to not make waves. You taught me that keeping Victoria and James happy was more important than standing up for myself. But my failed startup taught me something different. It taught me that sometimes you have to risk everything for what matters. It taught me that failure isn't fatal, it's educational. And it taught me that success without values is hollow. I turned back to the assembled crowd. I want to be very clear about something. I'm not doing this out of revenge. I'm doing this because NextGen deserves better leadership. The employees deserve to work in an environment where they're treated with respect. The patients who depend on our treatments deserve to know the company is built on ethical foundations. And yes, my siblings deserve the chance to become better people, even if that means facing consequences they've avoided their whole lives. Margaret addressed the crowd. Northeastern Capital fully endorses these changes. We believe they'll strengthen NextGen's culture and long-term prospects. Any investors who have concerns are welcome to schedule meetings with our team to review the transition plan. But I want to be clear. Emma Sullivan has proven to be an exceptional judge of both business opportunities and character. Her decisions regarding NextGen's leadership are sound. Several investors applauded. Others were nodding in agreement. I saw a few approaching our family lawyer, presumably to discuss the implications. There's one more thing, I said. Victoria, James, I want you to understand something. I gave you $200 million not because I thought you were perfect but because I saw potential. I still see that potential. You're both smart. You're both capable. You're both driven. But somewhere along the way you started believing that success gave you permission to treat people badly. It doesn't. Success without humanity isn't worth celebrating. I stepped closer to them. The changes I'm implementing aren't designed to punish you. They're designed to help you become the leaders NextGen actually needs. Leaders who inspire rather than intimidate. Leaders who build people up rather than tear them down. Leaders who understand that true strength comes from lifting others, not standing on them. Victoria looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I know how. Then learn, I said simply. You have access to the best leadership coaches in the country. You have a new CEO who can model ethical leadership. You have employees who are desperate for management that values them. And you have a sister who still believes you're capable of growth, despite everything. James finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Why? After how we treated you tonight, why would you still believe in us? Because someone believed in me when I failed, I said. My co-founder sued me, investors abandoned me, people called me a cautionary tale. But a few people saw past the failure to the lesson I'd learned and the person I'd become. They gave me another chance. I'm giving you the same thing. I turned to address the entire room one final time. I want everyone here to understand that NextGen Technologies isn't just about groundbreaking science or financial returns. It's about building a company that reflects the values we claim to care about: innovation, integrity, and human dignity. The leadership changes I'm implementing are designed to align our internal culture with those values. I believe that will make us not just more successful but more meaningful. Margaret started clapping. Then others joined in. Within moments the entire ballroom was applauding again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't the polite applause for expected remarks. It was genuine appreciation for taking a stand. As the formal presentations concluded and the crowd began to mingle again, I found myself surrounded by investors wanting to discuss not just NextGen, but my broader philosophy on values-driven investing. Several asked for my contact information. 3 offered to discuss partnership opportunities on other ventures. Meanwhile, Victoria and James sat at a table in the corner looking shell-shocked. Mom stayed with them talking quietly, probably trying to process what had just happened. Dad had disappeared entirely, presumably to the bar. Margaret pulled me aside. That was masterfully done, Emma. You gave them accountability without destroying them. You maintained your dignity while making your point. That's rare. I didn't want to destroy them, I said honestly. I wanted them to understand consequences. There's a difference. They're lucky you're their sister, Margaret observed. A different investor might have simply removed them entirely. You're giving them a chance to grow. Everyone deserves that chance, I said. I just wish they'd given me the same courtesy before tonight. As the evening wound down, I prepared to leave. I'd said what needed to be said, done what needed to be done. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Implementing the leadership changes, managing the media response, helping Dr. Morrison transition into the CEO role. But tonight I was done. Mom caught me at the door. Emma, wait. Please. I turned to face her. What is it, Mom? I'm sorry, she said, and this time her voice was firm, not uncertain. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you more over the years. I'm sorry I prioritized peace over justice. I'm sorry I let them treat you the way they did. You deserved better from all of us. I felt tears prick my eyes but blinked them back. Thank you for saying that. What you did tonight, standing up for yourself, for the employees, for what's right, that took courage, Mom said. I should have taught Victoria and James that kind of courage. Instead, I taught them that appearances mattered more than character. That's my failure, not yours. It's not too late, I said gently. For any of us. That's what tonight was about. Not revenge but reset. A chance to build something better. Mom hugged me tightly, crying into my shoulder. I'm so proud of you. Not because of the money or the business success but because of who you are. You could have been cruel tonight. You had every right. But you chose something harder. You chose to be just. As I drove home that night, my phone buzzed constantly with messages. Some from investors, some from press, some from NextGen employees who'd somehow gotten my number and wanted to thank me for the changes. But I ignored them all except one. It was from Victoria, sent at 11:47 p.m. I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if I deserve for you to read this. But I need you to know that you were right about everything. I've been a terrible sister. I've been a terrible person. I don't know how to fix that, but I want to try. If you're willing to help me learn, I'm willing to do the work. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry. I stared at the message for a long time. Trust would take time to rebuild. Relationships didn't heal overnight. But this was a start. Genuine acknowledgement, genuine remorse, genuine willingness to change. I typed back. Monday morning, 9 a.m. My office at Northeastern Capital. Bring James. We'll discuss the transition plan and what real leadership looks like. This is your chance, Victoria. Don't waste it. Her response came almost immediately. We'll be there. Thank you for not giving up on us. As I pulled into my parking space at my studio apartment, which was actually a penthouse condo in Boston's most exclusive building, I smiled. They still didn't know most of my story. They didn't know about the other investments, the real estate portfolio, the consulting firm I'd built, or the charitable foundation I'd established that had put 43 kids through college. They'd learn eventually. But not tonight. Tonight they'd learn the most important lesson. That respect isn't transactional, that failure doesn't define you, and that real power isn't about dominating others. It's about lifting them up while holding them accountable. And sometimes the family failure turns out to be the one holding all the cards. She just chose not to play them until absolutely necessary. That's what real success looks like.